Hi guys, happy Friday. Thanks for joining us. We are Igor and Anu. We are the owner and founders of Vinousreverie Wine Merchant out in Walnut Creek, California. And we are the shop for the adventurous wine drinker. And you're here watching our show for the adventurous wine drinker every Friday at 9:30. So today we are tasting, Igor, tell me what we're tasting.
So this is Grosjean is the wine. Fumin is the grape, and it comes from valled'aosta in northwest Italy.
Okay, awesome.
And we're going to have special guest Andrew Montes joining us.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I apologize for my my casualness. I am in a home of disarray as we are painting, moving furniture, getting ready for new arrivals. So
we're all homes of disarray at some point. All right.
Exactly. So
the badge of honor. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
I know we've had you on before, but do you mind introducing yourself again?
Yeah, I am Andrew Montes, and actually the last time I think I was here, I was actually working for a different company. So I've made a transition into a new position with a very similar role, very similar minded European focused book of wines, but it's a company called Neil Rosenthal. So I am a part of a team of two that help represent the Northern California and sell some awesome European wines.
Nice.
And adventurous wine at that. I mean, even more so than my last.
Hey, you're in
some out there wines.
Hey, so Andrew, can you give a little overview about Neil's company? Because he's one of the kind of original importers of great European wines.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. So I mean, you know, he started back in the early, probably actually mid-70s. Probably he had a wine shop in New York City. And he has a book that outlines this. Actually, it's called I can't remember what it's called right now, but he did write a book that kind of details the story. But you know, at his wine shop, he dealt with brokers and brought over European wine to sell in his wine shop. And then a gentleman by the name of Kermit Lynch, and then another gentleman on the East Coast named Robert Chatterton had a couple of years prior started their own import business, and they would themselves, instead of working through brokers, they would travel to Europe themselves and find the wines and bring them over themselves. So those were kind of the pioneers of the small import business from Europe. And Neil was, you know, just a couple of years later, he joined the fold in the early 80s. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, you know, there might be a couple other people in the mix there that I'm leaving out, but he's definitely, you know, one of the top, you know, one of the 5 original people that kind of started that model.
Is it Reflections of a Wine Merchant? Is that the?
That's the one, man.
Right,
He's a writer. He's a super poetic. So get ready for some poetry in motion in his rhetoric there. It's very, very compelling book, actually. It was my favorite book of all the importers who wrote the book.
Yes.
This is before I worked for him. It was my favorite of all those books. So
yeah.
Cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, and a lot of, you know, Italy and France, I think, Spain, but Italy and France are the two, I think, big parts of the book, right?
Yeah, it's just Italy and France. I know throughout the years he dabbled in some other areas, but it's just Italy and France. And there is one Spanish producer that had courted him to represent that finally got him over there. It's a Spanish cava producer by the name of Recaredo. Very prestigious producer, very expensive cavas. Normally we think of that category as a value category. This is not that. This is high level, very thoughtful, you know, very, very beautiful wines. But they courted him and they convinced him, and happy so. I actually had some of those wines out last week with some clients, and they're stunning wines. So yeah.
Yeah, there's some great cavas, like you mentioned. It's I think a lot of domestic consumers think it's a cheap sparkling wine. There's quite a few producers making quality sparkling wine, you know, cava, and I think they're even reorganizing the region for the renaming it. I think because the cava has such a bad reputation as a term, so I think a lot of the higher producers want to rename the process so people kind of don't associate their wines with the cheap stuff.
Oh, for sure, they already have. It's such a large area, and there's a very small area that's known for the best versions of that kind of category.
Yeah,
and they have. It was actually founded in the late '70s, but it's really kind of taking off at this point now. And there's a couple dozen producers that are now, they've left kind of the Cava DO, which is that general classification, and they are now making wines that are a new classification. Super compelling. Just a recommendation. There's a restaurant in San Francisco called Valled'aosta, and they probably have the largest swath of really high level quality cavas. Very good prices. So if you're in the city and kind of are interested in kind of seeing the top level of what cava can offer, that's probably the best option as far as I know, kind of in the Bay Area to really explore that category.
Okay.
It's a very renowned Spanish restaurant, which there's not that many, but there San Francisco has a few
really
of them.
nice, yeah.
Yeah, it's we love Spanish food, so that's specifically
Awesome.
from Spain.
Yeah, let's go to Basque Country. Let's go to San Sebastian and just eat our faces off. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Don't tease.
Cool.
All right, Andrew. So maybe we'll start with the region. I got my map.
There you go.
Valled'aosta, northwest Italy, the smallest region in Italy. Of the 20 regions, is the smallest one. Can you give it's a great kind of little story, and little is kind of maybe the term for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a rich history. I mean, obviously people have been there for a long time, just not many. And kind of geographically, it's the northwest corner. I mean, it's nestled in between Switzerland and France, and it's way up there. And there's two mountain peaks called there's one's Matterhorn and Mont Blanc, and they're just these sweeping mountains. And kind of tucked just underneath these peaks is this 50-mile stretch of agricultural valley entity that it's been there for a very, very long time. And it's as far as elevation goes, it's kind of from 500 meters to about 1,200 meters. And it's my understanding that they have some of the highest elevation vineyards in all of Europe that are commercially making wine from. I actually represent the one that has the highest. So that's another one, which is a white wine producer at 1,200 meters, which is just obscenely high.
Yes.
Right.
That's obscenely high. So they're subject to some pretty serious weather fluctuations. So, but the soil composition up there, as you can imagine, it's very icy conditions. So it's very sandy, but the primary rock there is really formed. It's glacial. I mean, it's glacier wine. I mean, the rock is, over the winter, and the wind kicks a bunch of rock and sediment around, and it kind of embeds itself into the ice, and the ice kind of forms these formations, and you just really get this really rugged, rocky terrain. I highly recommend hop on Google, type in valled'aosta, and look at pictures, because it's breathtaking up there.
Okay.
But it's extreme. So, but yeah, it's 50 miles long. There's probably 24 producers. And you're not making wine up there if you didn't grow up there. I mean, it's like, you don't open up a wine shop on the top of Mount Diablo, if you're not from the top of Mount Diablo. Yeah. I mean, that's not what you aspire to. So, I mean, the history is very, very long there, and continuous. So, and wine, wine's a very new entity on a commercial basis for global. They've been, they're Italian, so everybody makes and drinks wine for themselves. Yeah. So, but it really wasn't until the 1960s, 70s that they really started kind of putting a commercial hat on their thought process. And there was a lot of other agricultural entity up there. They did a lot of potatoes and corn and cattle. It's actually a big cattle area, which will be the transition into the producer we're going to talk about too. But yeah, it wasn't until really the 1970s that it started making wine. And then not until probably the last 15, 20 years that it's been any kind of a global commercial wine, mindset.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, it's interesting. Can you give us some of the grapes? So they have, I think, some indigenous grapes, especially the one we'll be drinking, but cool climate. So they grow a lot of cool climate grapes. And right. Pinot, Gamay, there's, a few examples of that. But maybe some indigenous grapes that they also grow that,
Yeah, I mean, Pré Blanc is a grape that's up there. And a lot of these varietals are grown in Switzerland too. Yeah. valled'aosta has more in common with probably the Swiss kind of wine growing area than it does with the Italian wine growing area. But Petite Rouge is another beautiful wine that has really beautiful bracing acidity. The whites up there are very, very savory, and they have a lot of saltiness to them, and which is great. So Chablis lovers would, really appreciate the white wines from that area. Gamay and Pinot, kind of more common grapes that are native to that area that we are more familiar with. There is usually the red grapes, you know, it's cold up there, so blending has kind of been their main, you know, asset to making palatable wines. So there's a wine called Tourette, which includes a lot of, you know, native varietals. Petite Rouge is another varietal, which literally means small red grape, but you know, it's maybe they just didn't have the patience to actually give it a name, so they just call it Petite Rouge. And then Fumin, which will transition us into what we're going to talk about today, which, you know, almost went extinct at one point, just because it's such an austere and structured varietal, but it made a comeback. And it made a comeback because it grows in kind of the most extreme areas. It's pretty unsusceptible to frost, and it has a short growing season, so it can ripen pretty efficiently in colder areas. And it, you know, Pinot Gamay are just soft and juicy. So a lot of times they would blend this varietal in with grapes like that to give it some structure and some longevity. And yeah, those are. I'm trying to think. There's another Primata is another native varietal. But again, you know, these are obscure Alpine varietals.
Yeah, interesting.
But Fonz, so the grape, I think it's thick skin. So it's got a little bit of tannic, or maybe more than a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And it gives it ageability. So, for example, this wine, it's a 2011 vintage, which is, you know, 10 years old. You don't see a lot of wines in distribution with this age on them.
Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, you know, good for you for sniffing out, you know, Neil's cellar in New York City, and we're bringing out all this fun stuff from New York for you.
You know what I do.
The current vintage is, I think, 17, and you know, and I haven't even had the. I mean, I probably had the 11, you know, back at my wine shop in New York, but that was on its current release. So
yeah,
you know, I can't even speak to the context of a 10-year-old version of it right now. You're going to have to tell us that. I think the current release we have is 2017, and while it's beautiful and dark and spicy and mineral, I mean, it's astringent. It just sucks the moisture out of your mouth. So, you know, it's just the kind of grape, if you're going to make a single varietal wine out of this grape, it needs time. Yeah. So, and that's another beauty of the company I work with. They're not afraid to kind of hang on to it for a while so that they can have an offering of that nature for, you know, people like yourselves who kind of want to explore something that, you know, the more interesting with some age and from a cellar and stored well. So.
Right, and Fumin, right? Somebody wrote Fumit, but it's Fumin.
Fumin, Fumin.
Yeah.
Well, 10 years old, the tannic structure is still there, and you actually tasted it beforehand, and you like to kind of give little notes. What did you think of it?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I wrote down dried dark cherries, Alpine strawberries.
Yeah, cool.
Oaky, chewy tannin. Oh, and it smelled great. It smelled like a little bit of peppered oak.
Yeah. I mean, it's got legs too. Like it seems like it probably could go a lot longer, right?
Well, you know, it's about that. So, you know, I like to kind of put it in context. So, this the 2011 vintage of Grosjean, Jancis Robinson, and Julia Hardin, you know, one of the critics for Jancis Robinson, she gave 17.5 points, which is about, you know, 94 points on a 100-point scale, which is a great score. Yeah. It's the highest score for Fumin in their database. So
this is the top of the class for 100% Fumin wines. This producer, yeah.
So she tasted it in 17, and she gave it a window through 25.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm tasting it right now. The tannic structure is strong. I mean,
you can push that out another 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, but you know, I think obviously this is a wine that, you know, the Italians they don't drink wine just in a glass. They drink wine at a dinner table with food. So, you know, even now, I think if you were to sit down and you were to like have some stewed goat leg or just some sort of local, you know, mountain meat dish that's been slow cooked.
It's all meats.
Yeah.
It's all meat up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's there is potatoes up there too. It's just funny because we actually bring potato chips in from an Alpine producer up there. It's hilarious. But yeah, but it's meat. I mean, Midwesterners would love it if it wasn't so cold up there. But it's just, yeah. I mean, this wine is like you put it on the table, you've decanted it, you know, you put the big Le Creuset, you know, or whatever, and you pull the top off, and you've been slow cooking something for 8 hours, and then the smell fills the room. You put your nose in that glass of wine, and it gives that kind of context. I mean, that's this wine. It's for your, of course we're going into summer, but buy it now because it'll be even better in 6 months, and then in the fall, you make your stewed meats, and you eat it with that, and that's what they would do there.
And these wines, Andrew, I think there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight. As you were mentioning earlier, it's mostly consumed there, so very, very little gets out. I mean, very little. Maybe 2 producers of Fumin. I don't know, maybe 3 at most.
I actually pulled up a list, and I saw 5 different Fumins, and I was surprised to see that many 100% Fumins.
They consider they're maybe potentially their best grape for the area.
Ageability wise, so they can fetch the biggest price for it. So everybody needs some money. It's the grape that can age the longest. Which in kind of our kind of global market adds value to a wine. Yeah. So it's the wine that can fetch the highest price. So for whatever that's worth, they make the most money off it. So of course this is our top wine. But yeah, I mean, it's just that's kind of the context of that.
And when somebody hears the term Alpine wine, this is the ultimate. This is the ultimate Alpine wine. And one of the things that Anu mentioned that I notice frequently when critics describe Alpine wines is the red wines with a strawberry kind of nose. So especially Alpine strawberries. If people ever had those.
It's a great note. That's just a great note.
Yeah, it's a great note. Yeah, and it's obviously common in Alpine wines and not in many other red wines.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. And you get that throughout. I mean, the climate and the terrain is just so influential there. You just get these bright floral, fresh, fruity tones, and I mean even the Pinot Noirs up there. The Gamay is beautiful, and they don't make it like Beaujolais, so they don't do carbonic with the Gamay traditionally there. So it's almost like treated like Burgundy. So you get it's much more denser fruit. It's not that light and soft. It's rich and dense and very high acid and lifted and very floral and fresh.
Hey, Andrew, I'm actually loving what you described. So can you kind of explain the carbonic process versus kind of the Burgundian process? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and not that, yeah. So, I mean, traditionally, it's when you pick a grape cluster, you have 2 choices. You can throw the whole grape cluster in there with all the stems, and you can stick it in the fermentation bin, or you can remove the stems, and you can kind of muddle everything up and then throw it in another fermentation bin. And essentially, when you leave the berries whole and you don't muddle it up, the fermentation starts happening on the inside of the berry, and kind of what that does is it pulls in more color faster, so that you end up having less structure. So you have a juicier, softer, more kind of fruitier wine, but it still has like nice dark color. It also adds a lifted, fresher aromatic, and it makes the wine much more drinkable very early. Whereas if you didn't do that, you're going to bring in more tannin, and you're going to bring in more structure, and you're going to have a much more substantial, denser wine. So I don't know if that answered it. Yeah. There's many nuances to that question you just asked. It's there's so much that affects the wine, whether you go one path or the other. But that's kind of the generality. It makes a much earlier drinking wine that tends to be a little bit more floral and lifted, as opposed to something that can be more dense and savory and yeah.
No, I think that's pretty cool explanation. We actually had a question about the high tone herbal notes. Yeah, I thought you get that on this wine. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Would you call it Alpine herbs?
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's true. It's just so effective. It's like mountain herbs. It's one of the cool. This is a total side note, but St. George Spirits makes these awesome gins. And they have their Botanivore gin, which is very classic kind of European style juniper, and stuff. And then they have a gin called Terroir Gin, and they go and they pick fresh herbs and stuff from the top of Mount Tam. You get mountain herbs and stuff. And when you put your nose in that gin with the mountain herbs, like it is so pungently distinct, like that cool climate. Like it's just so, it's just, I mean, you can't separate it from the gin. So for sure, I mean, it's just so influential, the climate up there. That's so extreme.
I think that I remember distinctly, I went to a farmer's market and I saw Alpine Strawberries and I grabbed them. And I remember the first time I had Alpine Strawberries, and they're so different from regular more acidic. So yeah, like I said, we're talking about Alpine berries, but they're very conventional store.
Well, yeah, they're small. They don't have any like steroids in them.
Yeah, they haven't been watered before you pick them, so they're like these big swollen strawberries.
You know, you just, that's what you mentioned with the gin. It's artisanal process versus industrial process.
Yeah.
In the wine world, you know, that's what we do with this show. That's why the information you're providing is so spectacular, is because we're kind of breaking down like what's the artisanal process and what's the industrial process. And you know, I don't think it's sentimental. It's you know, people who try to make quality wines versus economic efforts. Which
100%, yeah. And I think this area it's more about lack of influence than it is influence. It's so remote. It's like, you know, post World War II was really kind of the conventionalism of a lot of agriculture. We just had all this money pumping into machines and all this, you know, chemicals and stuff, and that's really where it kind of took off as post 1940s. You're up in the mountains, man. These people are just, you know, they were fairly untouched, and they didn't have all that, so they just naturally did it anyways. Like what's natural wine? It's how we've always done it. Yeah, you know, it's kind of they don't have moniker for it. It's just how we make wine. It's how my grandparents made wine, and there's you know, that's so special for a region like this, especially. It's so small and untouched, and you know, the wines can be wild, they can be unfamiliar, but that's awesome. Like, I mean, you're the whole concept of vinousreverie, you know, adventurous wine drinker. I mean, this is such a special region to kind of be in line with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and we love it, you know, and you know, thank you guys for bringing these great wines in, and you know,
all me.
Well, you know, but the information you're giving, it's so, I think it demystifies it and makes it intriguing to drink. And you know, it's funny, Andrew, what you just mentioned is probably a topic for a different show. But you're talking about, like, you know, these people who do things in a historical context, the way they make wine, versus completely different from what Napa does. They make maybe you know, like these super acclaimed wines. I don't know what to say. It's like somebody who's looking for fame versus somebody.
Capitalism, baby, capitalism.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it's a fascinating exploration, and there's so much created like myth that Napa tries to create, which it is what it is. It's a myth in their favor, I think, and we're kind of here like, you know, I don't want to come off as sentimental, like, oh, buy these mom and pop wines. Like, if mom and pop wines are not good, like, I'm not bringing them in.
They're good.
They're good. Like, one thing is they better be good. Then you look if they're mom and pop or not. But they're going to be good as the, you know, number one priority.
Yeah, they speak more to a sense of place. I mean, you save a lot of money by, you know, buying things like this than, you know, going to, you know, to a region like Napa, which has just been so financially, you know, realized. And it's just more interesting. I mean, you know, explore. I mean, you also have to understand a lot of these Napa producers and a lot of these, you know, commercial producers, they spend a lot of money on advertising to try and box you in, like to make it familiar. They understand, you know, our psyche is built on familiarity. Like if we see 10 billboards, we're familiar with something, and we see it in the grocery store. Oh, I've seen that before. Yes. Oh, I must like it because I'm familiar with it. Yeah. It's a total, they get it. They understand that if we're passive minded at that point, familiar means safe. Yeah. And, you know, it takes, you know, it takes a little chutzpah to kind of break that mold. And, you know, don't worry about spending $15 to $25 on something you're not familiar with, go for it. Have fun. You don't have to love it, like it, think it's interesting, and I think that journey, once you break it, you'll figure it out. And yeah, it's just.
Also, you have your shopkeep as your friendly guide, right? So.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
No, I think I was speaking to someone who said like, hey, some people want to drink, they go to Napa and they buy $50, cabs, and they don't want to drink on a Tuesday night. They want a good everyday drinking wines. And I would say I would go past that. I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. The wines that you buy for $25 are better than the $50 cabs you're buying in Napa. Not a substitute, a cheaper substitute. They're better, more interesting wines. It's like a forceful statement. I truly believe in that.
There's actual value.
Yeah.
It's just there's actual value.
Yeah. So and this is cool. I think this is and you join us. I love this conversation that you bring in, an overview. I think the last thing I want to mention about the wines from Grosjean is that a couple of months ago, Eric Asimov mentioned them in New York Times. So I mentioned Justice Robinson, and New York have given high praise to this producer. So
yeah. Before I started working directly with these, I bought these producers back in my wine shop in New York. This in my understanding, this is just one of the premier producers in all of valled'aosta. And Neil Rosenthal's known for kind of championing this. He has 4 producers in valled'aosta. That's probably 10 to 15% of the entire region.
Yeah.
He started here. He's been working with them for 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to kind of see these, his hard work kind of come to, and they're starting to get the recognition that he saw 20, 30 years ago, and has been sitting on these and working for these, and hand selling these, and like going to the streets and trying to preach. And global warming is helping because they're making them a little bit more accessible on the front end. But it's coming along, and then you're doing your job. We've quipped about our mindset on the importance of small retailers, and it's such a much better service than going to one of these larger. You're just going to get somebody who knows the product, who's spent time, who's tasting everything, not just some sort of cashier or just some sort of staffer that is just trying to get you to buy something because they have an incentive to clear out the 150 cases that their boss bought of it. It's just a different model. Like, you're going to get an honest recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, kind of preaching to the choir, but like, we believe it. I think all of us believe it. And bottom line, I believe, we're drinking these wines. We're drinking the best wines in the world. That's it. I don't believe people who go into a casual store buying stuff off the. I don't believe they're drinking the best wines in the world.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. At lower price points, same price points, higher price points. It's there's a lot of wine in the world, but relatively little of it is really good to great, I think. And a lot of it comes from unknown regions. If you mostly know California wine, as a side note. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, we may not be 1%ers like Bill Gates is, but we can be 1%ers of our wine drinking world.
We certainly.
I don't believe 1%ers. I think they drink a lot of expensive wines. I don't believe that they drink the best wine in the world.
Yeah, I'm sure they're coming across a lot of them, but that's no, absolutely not. You don't need to spend too much to drink the top 1% of the wine in the world, for sure. Well, speaking of quality, yeah, for sure.
As a little kind of comparison. Here's 3 wines that also got 17.5 points. That's what I mentioned. This wine got, which we retail for mid-30s.
Yeah.
Opus One, Insignia, and Sassicaia. All 3 of those wines got. So they got the same score as this wine, and their Opus One retails for $370.
So buy 10 cases of this one, and instead of for 1 bottle of that one, it's like it's crazy. That's crazy, man. Yeah, the price disparagement is, it's, yeah.
But it's just context. So when they say, "Oh, I'm buying Opus One," it's so great. It's like no, it's just as good as this one.
This is great right here.
It's not better. It's just as good. Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, I concur. I concur.
All right, hey, that was a great conversation. Thank you for taking your time out to talk to us. Second baby's coming soon, so we want to say congratulations.
6 or 7 weeks. So my eyes are open right now. So let's good stuff. Though. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. This is a good time.
Have some Fumin,
Yeah.
Yes. Take care.
I gotta grab another bottle of that. Although mine would be 17, so I gotta lay it down. So I'm gonna have to grab some from New York like you did.
Yeah, that's what I do.
All right. So much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you very much.
Good night. Good night, everyone. See you guys next Friday.
Guys, bye.